asked. There was a question about whether somebody who has like a mess mitzvah, and we find the mess mitzvah, he has a bris or he doesn't have a bris, would that make a difference because of the simonim? So I called a friend, a big Talmud Chacham, and he said to me that yes, there would be a difference because it would change the majority. In other words, when you go after a roiv, right, you go after a roiv with all things being equal. So the majority of all things being equal. So if you find a person, right, and this person is like everybody else, so then you say we go according to the majority. But if there's a particular distinguishing characteristic about this person that is different to the norm, then that would change which group it belongs to. So therefore, if somebody is found and he's circumcised, obviously we would say we want to know not just who are the majority of the people here, but who are the majority of the people who are circumcised in this town. So that's a different kind of majority. So he said definitely it would make a difference if there was a simon like that, whether he was or he wasn't circumcised, we would go and take that into account. So that's with regards to that. With regards to the Malbim that I quoted yesterday, so this was like bothering me no end because I couldn't make heads or tails of it because the last 3 words or the last 4 words really threw me off. So while I was speaking to my friend, Rabbi Blumenthal in Lakewood, so he looked up the Malbim for me, and he told me he has a more updated version, and in that updated version, the word loy is not there, which then makes the whole Malbim make sense, where the Malbim is saying that when we have a base Moshav, right? So there it's teaching us that it's only when you have the walls first and then the houses. It's not the opposite where you have the houses and then only afterwards you put up a wall. And that fits in with what we were saying over here in the Gemara. So that was a relief for me. I thought I was going crazy, but he tells me that it's just simply a typographical error. I tried to find other versions of it online. I couldn't. They all are there with the same mistake. So I will, God willing, I'm going to try and see if I can get my friend to send me a picture. Or I went into the base medrash this morning to try and find the Malbim, but I couldn't find one. I tried 2 shuls and neither of them had the Malbim al Torah, which is a bit surprising. But anyway, I couldn't find it, so I'm going to have to ask him to tell me, to hopefully send me a picture so I can see that for myself. So that was that. Now, those are those particular issues. Now, there's one more issue which I would like to address, and that is a mistake that I made in Pshat here in the Gemara, and it actually goes back to the Mishnah as well. And that is when we said that the reason why the rabbis were lenient in for the villages. I said the reason is because they wanted to make it possible for them to provide their brothers with food and supplies for Yom Tov. Now, the way I had understood that, which was wrong, is that it means that they could get back to their own town and help the people of their town. That's not what it means. That is completely wrong. What it means is that because the people who were really the supply chain, they were the people who would have all the produce that would supply the surrounding towns, since they're the ones that are supplying everybody with their food. So what we're saying is, because we want the people in the cities, the regular cities, to be able to receive all the supplies that they need for Yom Tov, if we're going to make the villages come in, right? Come in on Yom Tov itself, meaning on Purim itself, right? Then what's going to happen is they're not going to be available to make all the deliveries for everybody else for Purim. So therefore, when it wasn't going to fall out on a day of Yom HaKnisa, we made a special leniency to be able to accommodate the people of the town. That's the way the Gemara initially wants to understand this. Ultimately, the Gemara will amend it and say that that's not how to understand it, but that is the initial understanding of the Gemara and not how I previously explained it. And so we're going to go over that little shtickle again, that little piece again, so that we can read it properly and understand it properly. And then we'll continue with the rest of the Gemara. So again, this is 4a2.
Rabbi,
yes.
Rabbi, 4a2, I don't see the word Mishnah.
No, it says Eloshak Forim. It's the last two paragraphs. Eloshak Forim Maktim Liyam Makrisa. Okay, you have it?
Not yet. Not a teaching from Rabbi Yeshua.
On the right column.
Gemara quotes from the Mishnah.
Yeah.
That one?
Ella. That one. That's the one. Okay? Okay. Ella, the Mishnah said that they would make an exception for the residents of the villages, that they can advance the date for the reading of the Megillah to the day of the assembly. Rabbi Chanina, so Rabbi Chanina wants to come along and give us the reason. I just want to point out that Rashi in the Mishnah, where it says this, Rashi says the reason is because they don't have experts to read the Megillah for them. So therefore, we want to make them come to the day of the Yom HaKnisa, where they're anyway coming in for the best din, right? So that's why we make it early. That's why we make it earlier. But Rabbi Chanina comes along and says that the reason why the rabbis made it easier for them, and the sages were lenient with regards to the villages and allowed them to come earlier to the day of the assembly, in order so that they'll be able to provide water and food for the Purim feast of their brothers who live in the towns that they're coming into. So in other words, if they were going to come in on the day of Purim itself, and they will be busy listening to the Megillah, then that would prevent them from making all the deliveries to all the people who need the supplies for their Yom Tov. So if Purim didn't fall out on a Yom HaKnisa anyway, then they would make this special leniency to allow people to come in earlier and thereby be free to come in on Yom Tov and provide everybody with what they need. Moving over to Daled Amud Beis 4b. So the Gemara challenges Reb Chanina and he says, "The Meimra, are you telling me this the Takanta, the Krachin Havu, that the reason why we made this leniency was for the benefit of the towns? Didn't we learn in the Mishnah? If Purim fell out on a Monday, which is a Yom HaKnisa, is Kfarim Vayar's Gedelis carried by Bayim. The villages and the towns, they all read on the same day, right? Because they're all there anyway. Now, but in Isa, if what you said is true, meaning if you're telling me that the whole purpose is to enable the people of the town to have these people deliver their needs, then then why don't we make the villages come in to the Thursday before, and this way they'll be free to be able to provide everybody in the town that on the day of Purim with all the needs that they have to be delivered. So the Gemara answers the reason why that is not an option is hevel lahu asara, because that scenario, what would happen is it would fall out on the 10th. Thursday would end up being the 10th of Adar. And the 10th was not something that the rabbis enacted. They didn't allow to have the 10th day of Adar, a day that is eligible to read the Megillah. And so that's why that was not a possibility. So therefore, at this point, Reb Chanina's explanation still stands, but it's going to be challenged again. Toshma, come in here. We mentioned this before. That later on it says in the Mishnah, it says what happened if sorry, it says that if Purim fell out on a Thursday, that the villages and the large towns read on that day, meaning from our Mishnah, we see that if it falls out on Thursday, then the villages and the people from the large towns, they all read it on Thursday. If you're going to say that the reason why we're making this special dispensation for these people is for the benefit of the people of the town, so you told me why you can't go from Monday to Thursday backwards because it ends up on the 10th. But in the case where Purim falls out on a Thursday, then you could still go back to Monday and still be within the time range, meaning you'd still be on the 11th. Let's make it to Monday. This way, the villagers will what? Will hear the Megillah on Monday, and on Thursday, what's going to happen is, in order to accommodate the people of the town, they'd be free to go and do all the deliveries, because the Achadasu is still going to be the 11th. So the Gemara answers that the reason why that's not a possible suggestion is because because the rabbis made a rule that we are not going to shift the Megillah reading from one Yom HaKnisa to another. Some say the reason for this is because if I'm going to do it and allow for you to move from Thursday to Monday, right, then you might come to say, oh, you see, they allowed it from one Yom HaKnisa to another Yom HaKnisa. So therefore, perhaps we'll be able to move it from Monday backwards to Thursday. And then you'd end up reading it on the 10th. And that's a problem. The rabbis didn't want that. So they made what's called loy plug. No difference. We're not going to differentiate. And we're going to say that from Yom Knisa to Yom Knisa is not allowed. We're not going to shift that. So therefore, Reb Chanina's suggestion still hasn't been completely knocked off. So now the Gemara is going to refute Reb Chanina's explanation, and that is Tashema. Have a listen from what we read soon in the next Mishnah. Amar Reb Yehuda. Reb Yehuda said, "Imosai." When do we say in our Mishnah that the villagers are allowed to read the Megillah earlier than the 14th? It's only it's only when they have this custom to come in on a Monday and a Thursday to have all their issues taken care of by the Besdin. However, if it's a place where they don't have this custom to come in on Mondays and Thursdays, so then you only read it on its proper day, which means they would have to come in on the 14th, whatever day of the week that fell out, and besides Shabbos, obviously. Now, this is where we challenge Reb Chanina. And if you're going to say that the reason why we allow people to come in earlier is in order to help out the people of the towns with their provisions, so then are you going to, just due to the fact that this particular village doesn't have the custom to come in on Monday and Thursday, are you going to cause the towns to lose out? Meaning to say, if you're telling me the whole reason is to help out the people of the towns, what difference does it make to me whether these people usually come in on Monday and Thursday or don't usually come in on Monday and Thursday? The whole purpose of letting them do it early is to help the people of the town out to have their deliveries on time. So obviously, the fact that the Mishnah says that it's only those towns which ordinarily come in on Monday and Thursday tells me that it has nothing to do with helping out the people of the town. So therefore, what we have to do is we have to modify the statement of Reb Chanina. He says, don't say that the reason that Chachamim allowed it is in order to be able to provide water and food to the people on the 14th. Rather, the way you should understand it is that what Reb Chanina was trying to say is because a whole year these people are constantly the supply chain and providing everybody and delivering everything to everybody, all their needs a whole year round. So therefore, we made a special, leniency for them to try and accommodate them. They're busy accommodating us a whole year, so we're going to try to accommodate them, and we're going to try to make it easier for them that if they come in on a Monday and Thursday anyway, to make them not have to come in especially to hear the Megillah on a day that they wouldn't otherwise be coming in. We're not going to make them come in, and this is kind of a reward for them, providing the people of the towns with their needs. So that is the pshat of the Gemara. Okay, we're going to move on to the next shtickle. Anybody has any questions or any comments that they'd like to make, please feel free to do so now. You just first have to unmute yourself, but otherwise, if no one has any comments or questions, we're going to continue on with the Gemara. Okay, so says the Gemara, Ketzad, we said in the Mishnah, how is this all going to fall out? In other words, you said Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, right? Yud Dalet, Tesvav, these are all the days you can read the Megillah. So the Mishnah asked, how is this all going to play out? On what way, when would it be 11, when would it be 12, and so on? So the Mishnah proceeds to say, Chol Yesh B'Sheni B'Shabbos, if the 14th of Adar falls out on a Monday, right? Then Kifarim Vayaris Gedeles, Kerim Be'Bayim. Then the villages and the large towns read on that day, meaning on Monday, on the 14th. Now, the Gemara is asking on the way the Mishnah presents and asks, Maishna Reisha, why do we make a difference with the Reisha, the Nakat Sidura, the Yarcha, where it chose to use the order of the month, the day of the month? So it says, Megillah Nikras, the Megillah is read, Ba'chadasar on the 11th and the 12th and the 13th, and it goes in the order of the days of the month, from the earlier to the later, from 11 to 12 to 13 to 14 to 15. And then why? When it comes to the end of the Mishnah, where we start to spell it out, we now change and we use the order of the days of the week, starting from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. What's the problem? The problem is that it ends up going backwards, because when you start from Monday, right? Monday is what? Monday is the 14th. So now, if Purim fell out on Monday, then you are providing me, excuse me, Monday is an example of 14 and 15. Tuesday, right, which is going to be the next one, Tuesday is going to be what? Tuesday is the 14th. Monday is going to be the 13th, right? And then when you go to Wednesday, the next one is going to be what? The 12th. And the next one is going to be the 11th. So now you're going backwards. So in the beginning, when you use the days of the month, you're going forwards, 11, 12, 13. Now you're mentioning the days of the week. And instead of having 11, 12, 13, you're presenting to me 13, 12, and 11. So the question is, why make that change? Yeah, understand the question? Why make that change? So the Gemara answers like this. Remember that most things were taught Baal Peh, right? And so you want people to remember these things. And the Gemara is going to answer that if we were to do it in that way, then what's going to happen is you're going to have to start mentioning that if Purim falls out on Sunday, then if Purim falls out on Shabbos, then if Purim falls out on Sunday. And that's something people are going to find very confusing. And this is why the Gemara, the Mishnah, uses this particular style to say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that people can remember. That's what he says. Aidi, the mishap chilei, because if in the latter part of the Mishnah, if they would follow the order of the days of the month, then the days of the week would be in the reverse order. And that would be confusing for people to remember the halacha. So therefore, Nakat Sidur Diyema, the Tana follows the order of the days to avoid the confusion, and that's why it's that in that particular order. And why do we start from Monday and not from Sunday? So that's because we wanted to start with a day where everybody does it on the right day. Everybody does it on Monday, on the 14th, and then the people of the walled cities will do it on the 15th on Tuesday, and everybody's in the right place doing the right thing. Okay. The next shtickle. What happens if the 14th fell out on a Friday? So we said in our Mishnah that the people of the village, they come and they begin their reading when? On the day of the assembly, which means on Thursday. Okay. Now, what about the people who live in the regular towns, the large cities, right? That are unwalled, they would read on Friday. And what about the people who lived in the walled cities? Since the 15th is now going to be what? It's going to be Shabbos, and we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. What are they going to do? So we said in our Mishnah that what they do is that they read it on the same day as the people from the unwalled cities. So they be reading it on the 14th, on Friday, together with the towns. Frankly, Gemara, who is the opinion of our Mishnah? In other words, who's the Tana of our Mishnah? And the Gemara answers, Rabbi Yasi. It can go in accordance both with the opinion of Rabbi and the opinion of Rabbi Yasi. Frankly, Gemara, my Rabbi, where do you find the case where Rabbi holds this opinion? Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa. Now, in this Brisa, first we're going to present the view of the Tanakama, which is not like Rabbi, which is not like our Mishnah. But we're bringing down this Brisa to be able to show that the next opinion, the opinion of Rabbi, is exactly like our Mishnah. Tanya, we learned in a Brisa, Chol is B'erev Shabbos. What happens if Purim falls out on a Friday, which means the 14th is Friday, the 15th is Shabbos. Okay, so what's going to happen? So the Tanakhama says like this: Kefarim v'ayoris gedolos, the villages and the big towns, which are not walled, makdimin liyeh maklisa, they will have to both bring it a day early. So instead of the unwalled cities reading on Purim itself on the 14th, they and the people from the village will both do it on the Yom HaKnisa, on the Thursday. And the Gemara will elaborate as to why. What's the opinion of this Tanakama? It's a bit strange, but we'll see why. And this Tanakama says, and the people in the walled cities, they're going to read it on Friday. They can't read it on Shabbos, they're going to read it on Friday. That's the opinion of the Tanakama. That is not like what we said in our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said that the unwalled city and the walled cities would both do it on Friday, and only the people from the villages, they would come in and do it a day early, which would be on the 13th. Okay. Rebbe says, and he's going to say exactly what our Mishnah says, I say, the people who are from the town, they should not move from their place, meaning to say, they should not move from the 14th. Since it's the day that they should be reading it, they should read it on the 14th. And therefore, according to Rabbi, instead of moving the people of the unwalled cities to a day earlier, it should be the walled cities and the unwalled cities should both read on the Friday, on the day of Purim, on the 14th. Perfect. This is a proof to us in the Gemara that our Mishnah can go according to Rebbe, because we have a brisa where he explicitly states that opinion. And now the Gemara wants to understand, but what's the reason for the Tanakama? Why would the Tanakama tell the people from the unwalled cities that they should not do it on the right day, on the 14th, and read it on the 13th? It makes no sense. So that's what the Gemara is asking. My time in the Tanakama. What's the reason of the Tanakama to read it on the 13th instead of the 14th? So he says, because he learns out from a pasuk. It says, B'chol shana v'shana. So in the Megillah, it says that the Jewish people should that the people should observe these 2 days, the 14th and the 15th, in accordance with their writing and in their proper time. And then it says the words B'chol shana v'shana, each and every year. So those words B'chol shana v'shana seem to be additional. They don't really need to be that. Once you're saying that it should be done in accordance with how it's written, right? So in that time, so why write every single year? So he says, Ma b'chol shana v'shana, it's coming to teach me that just like every single year, you always have the unwalled cities are always going to precede their reading of the Megillah to that of those who read in the walled cities. In other words, we always read on the 14th, and Yerushalayim always reads on the 15th. Our day always precedes their day of reading. So therefore, he says, so afkan, so too over here, if you have a situation where Purim is on Friday, which means Shushan Purim is going to be on Shabbos, and the people in the walled cities in Yerushalayim, for example, they can't read it on Shabbos. So what are you going to do? You're going to bring it early for them. But what's going to happen for us is that you're not going to have the unwalled cities reading it before the walled cities. So he's saying, just like it, when it says B'chol Shana V'Shana, it's teaching me just like every year. You read it before the walled cities. So Afkan, so to over here, Iyar is kind of the unwalled cities have to precede the walled cities, and that's why the Tanakama of this brisa says that you have to have the reading of the Megillah of the unwalled cities on the 13th, even though it's not the normal day that they would have to do it. Okay? In other words, it's a covet. It's a covet to the walled cities. That's what. We're concerned about the walled cities. That, their covet should stay in its place, right? Now, Frank the Gemara, you're telling me that you have a limud from B'chol Shana V'Shana, but I'll tell you that B'chol Shana V'Shana might be teaching me something completely different. Ve'ema, let us say that B'chol Shana V'Shana comes to teach me as follows. Ma Kol Shana V'Shana. Just like every single year. That the every year the unwalled towns are not shifted from their regular spot of reading it on the 14th. In other words, unless what's going to happen is that Purim falls out on a Thursday, Purim falls out on a Shabbos, the 14th falls out on a Shabbos, then we would have to move it. But other than that, every other year, we never move them out of their place. They always stay in their place. So too, in this particular unique situation where Purim falls out on a Friday and the walled towns can't read it on Shabbos, nevertheless, the people who are in unwalled towns should not be moved from their spot. So that's what B'chol Shana V'Shana comes to teach me, not like what you said. And for the Gemara, the Tanakama is going to turn around to you and say, Shani Hacha, it's different over here. Why? Delay Efsha. It's not possible, which means to say as follows. You have two considerations to make over here. One is that the unwalled cities should always read before the walled cities. And the other concern is that the unwalled cities should never be moved from the day that they should read the Megillah, which would be the 14th. Here, in this particular case, you can't accommodate for both concerns. So our Tanakama says that the focus has to be on the unwalled cities reading the Megillah always a day before the walled cities. And that's why he says he doesn't accept this limud of B'chol Shana V'Shana, meaning that the unwalled cities should never be moved from their spot, because if I've got to choose one over the other, I'm going to choose B'chol Shana V'Shana to teach me the consideration that you always have to have the unwalled cities reading before the walled cities. Okay. Frank the Gemara, the other way around. Rebbe, what's the reason, my timer, what's the reason for Rebbe that he says that both the unwalled cities and the walled cities, meaning us and Yerushalayim, would all read on Friday, on the 14th. So he says, I learned that B'chol Shana V'Shana means, as we just mentioned, Ma Kol Shana V'Shana. Came on. Just like each and every year, the towns are not shifted from the regular spot. Afkan, so too, in a case where Purim falls out on a Friday, we're not going to push the unwalled cities from their regular spots because of Yerushalayim, because of the walled cities. We're not going to push them off. And so therefore, he says that B'chol Shana V'Shana is primarily coming to teach me this point, not to move the unwalled cities from their regular spot of reading it on the 14th. Frank the Gemara, just like we asked the Tanakama, we asked the Rebbe, B'chol Shana V'Shana, maybe the teaching of B'chol Shana V'Shana comes to teach me, like what the Tanakama says, Ma Kol Shana V'Shana Ayoris the Mukafin, just like every year, unwalled towns are always reading the Megillah the day before Yerushalayim, before the walled cities. Afghan, so too, in this particular case, it's coming to teach me that the unwalled cities should read before the walled cities. So he says, Shaina Hacha. So Rebbe would answer you and say that here's different. The La'eftra, you cannot take both considerations, and you can only choose one. And he holds that the main consideration is not to move the unwalled city from the day that it should read the Megillah, which is the 14th. That's the primary consideration. And so therefore, we're not going to make the unwalled cities read it on the 13th. Okay, so here, but at least what we conclude from this is that the opinion of Rebbe fits with our Mishnah. Okay, now we move on to Rabbi Yossi, because we said that our Mishnah can fit both according to Rebbe and according to Rabbi Yossi. Frank the Gemara. So far, so good. Everybody still following? Yeah. Okay. I hope so. Frank the Gemara. My Rabbi Yossi. What is the statement that you refer to about Rabbi Yossi, which shows me that his view fits with our Mishnah? The Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, Chol Yes Erev Shabbos, if the 14th day of Adar falls on an Erev Shabbos on Friday. So we said that what? That the people from the walled cities can't read it on the 15th because it's Shabbos. So what should he do? Mukafin, Ukfarin, Maktim and Liyeh Maknisa. The walled cities and the villages advance their reading to the day of the assembly, which would be Thursday, which would be the 13th. And the large unwalled towns read on that day, on Friday. And that's his opinion. So 1 second. Now we've got a really crazy story. The Tana Kama of this brisa, which is not Rabbi Yossi's opinion, we'll see. Rabbi Yossi's opinion is going to be like our Mishnah. But this Tana of this brisa turns around and says, in a case where Purim fell out on a Friday, you know what you should do? The people who can't read it on Shabbos, because the 15th is on Shabbos, they should bring it in, and they should bring it early, and they should read it when? On Thursday, the Yom HaKnisa. The villages, they should also read it on the Thursday. And only the unwalled cities, right? They're the ones who will be the ones to read it on Friday. So this is, wow. Here you're going to have a situation where the walled cities is going to read it before the unwalled cities. That's the opinion of this Tana Kama. Rabbi Yossi disagrees, and Rabbi Yossi agrees with our Mishnah. And what does he say? For those who are trying to find the place, the article is 4b3, right? So we ain't mukafin kaitmin la yaris. Rabbi Yossi says that the walled cities cannot precede the unwalled towns, and so therefore, Ella Elu ve'elu kerim bebayim. Rabbi Yossi's opinion is like Rabbi's opinion and like the opinion of our Mishnah, that both the unwalled cities and the walled cities would read on the Friday. So here we see that Rabbi Yossi cannot fit with our Mishnah. Frag the Gemara, my kind of the Tana Kama. What's the reasoning of the Tana Kama to come along and say that the walled cities should bring it early and read it on Thursday? So he says, it says in the Pasuk B'chol Shana V'Shana, each and every year. So what is the B'chol Shana V'Shana coming to teach me? It's coming to teach me as follows. Ma Kol Shana V'Shana, just like every year. Ayoris Ba'arba Asa, that the Ayoris, the towns, are read on the 14th year. And we have a principle, Uzmane Shozeh, Le'Uzmane Shozeh. You cannot have the time of the walled cities and the time of the unwalled cities being on the same day. If you remember earlier in the Gemara, we said Bismanehem. One of the things we learned from the word Bismanehem in their times teaches me that the time of the walled cities is not like the time of the unwalled cities. So since we have this principle that the time of the walled cities is not like the unwalled cities, so too we'll say over here, just like every year we say that you cannot have just like every year we say that the Ayaris read on the 14th, and we have this principle that the unwalled cities and the walled cities don't read on the same day. So therefore, Afkan, so to over here, Iyar is Barbasa, Arbasa. We're going to have the unwalled cities, meaning the towns, they're going to read on the 14th. And the times of the walled cities cannot be the same time as the unwalled cities. So they cannot read it on Shabbos, and you can't do it later Sunday because you can't push it past the 15th. So the only option we have is to make the distinction between the 2 days by making the people from the walled cities read it on the 13th, on Thursday. Yeah, you understand the svara? It's a logical svara. He's saying we want to be able to have everything. We want to have the cake and eat it too. We're going to have the people from the walled cities reading it on the same day they would read it every year. And in order to make sure not to have the walled cities and the unwalled cities reading it on the same day, therefore, the only choice we have is to have the walled city people from the walled cities read it a day earlier than the walled cities, which would be on the 13th. Okay. The Gemara, that's what you want to learn from. Maybe we could come along and we could tell you that B'chol Shana V'Shana teaches me something else. What does B'chol Shana V'Shana come to teach me? It comes to teach me B'chol Shana V'Shana. Ein mukafin kaidmin la'yaros. Just like every year, you never have a situation where the people who are living in walled cities will ever read the Megillah a day before the people who are in the unwalled cities. Afkan, so to over here, ein mukafin kaidmin la'yaros. Now, when Purim falls out on a Friday, right, you're not going to have a situation where the walled cities are going to read a day before the unwalled cities, and therefore we would have to rule and say that they should both at least read it on the same day. So the Tanakama would answer and say, Shaina Hacha, it's different over here. Why delay extra? I can't have that possibility. In other words, just like we said before, when you have two conflicting considerations, you've got to choose one because you can't accommodate every both considerations. So this Tanakama says it's not. I'm going to take a preference to not having it on the same day. Then the concern of B'chol Shana V'Shana teaching me that the people from the walled cities never read it before the people of the the people of the walled cities never reading it before the people of the unwalled cities. That's his argument, the Tanakama. Now, what about Rabbi Yasi? My time in the Rabbi Yasi. So again, we're going to repeat all of this again. My time in the Rabbi Yasi. What's the reason of Rabbi Yasi? Because he says B'chol Shana V'Shana. When it says every year, it comes to teach me like this. Just like every year, we never have a situation where the walled cities will not precede the. We never have a situation where the walled cities precede the unwalled cities. So Afghan, so to over here, when it falls out on Friday, we're not going to allow for a situation where the walled cities will read it before the unwalled cities. Frank, the Gemara, what about the other limud? Maybe we could come along and say that when it says each and every year, it's just like every single year. That the time of the walled cities is unlike the time of the unwalled cities. Afghan, so too, when it falls out on a Friday, right? We have to be concerned about not having the two reading it on the same day. They have to be different days. So Rabbi Yasi would answer, Shiny Hacha is different over here to Laefsha, because it's not possible. Because at the end of the day, you have two considerations, they're conflicting, you can only take one, and his preference is to take the consideration of not having the unwalled cities reading before the walled cities like every year. Okay. So what do we have over here? We have as a case where our brisa over here of Rabbi Yasi fits with our Mishnah. So that's why the Gemara said before that our Mishnah can go in accordance with both Rebbe and Rabbi Yasi. So now we're going to present a case where it seems that Rebbe gives a ruling which seems to be in conflict with our Mishnah. What does that mean? Not with our Mishnah, with our statement. Frank the Gemara v'Savar Rabbi Iyar is it really true that Rebbe holds that towns are not shifted to the day of the assembly. If you remember, Rebbe said that when it comes to unwalled towns, they're going to read it on Friday, right? They're not going to push it forward to Thursday. What about the fact that the people from the walled cities are also doing it on the same day? It doesn't matter. Rebbe says we're not going to push them back to the Yom HaKnisa, right? That's just the way it is. Every year, B'chol Shana V'Shana, they read it on the 14th, so we're not going to move it. We're not going to move it to a Yom HaKnisa. So we're trying to imply from that Rebbe is of the opinion that you never push the people from the unwalled cities to a Yom HaKnisa. Frank the Gemara V'Atanya, did we learn in the Brisa? Cholias b'Shabbos. What happens if Purim fell out not on Friday, but it fell out on Shabbos? So then, what is the rule? Kforim makdimin liyom HaKnisa. The villages advance to Thursday. Va'ayoris gedolos kairin be'erev Shabbos. The large unwalled towns read on Friday. And the walled cities will read on the next day on a Sunday. That's the Tanna Kamma's opinion. Comes along Rebbe, again, what's the opinion? It falls out on Shabbos. We're going to have everything as follows. You're going to have the people from the unwalled cities, I'm going to read it on Friday, the day before, the 13th. The people from the villages, they're going to go to the Yom HaKnisa, they're going to read it on the 12th. And the people from the walled cities, they're going to read it on their normal day, which is on the 15th. No problem. But Rebbe says no. Rebbe says, you know what we're going to do in this particular case, when Purim falls out, when the 14th falls out on a Shabbos, Rebbe says, I say, since the unwalled towns have been shifted from the regular spot already, because we don't read on Shabbos, so then they're not Friday is already not going to be the 14th anyway, so Yidachul Yom HaKnisa, they are shifted to the day of the assembly, Thursday. So now that seems to be a departure from his view in the earlier Brisa, where he said that no, that B'chol Shana V'Shana means that every year they shouldn't be moved from the regular spot. And here we see that although they're being moved from the regular spot anyway, right? Because Shabbos they're not going to do it anyway. So why don't you just move back to Friday, not to move it too far from where its regular spot is? And Rebbe says, no, you actually go back to Yom HaKnisa. So it seems to be a departure from this principle that Rebbe says that they should do it every year, the same day. So everything Gemara wants to say, Haki Hashta, how can you compare apples with oranges? You can't make the comparison between these two brises. Why? Hassam, the brisa that you just quoted now, is the Manam Shabbosi. There, it's talking about the time for the walled cities is on Shabbos. And since Shabbos, Vahoyul, the Nidchu, Yudachu, since the unwalled towns are already shifted from Shabbos, because you can't read it on Shabbos, so they're shifted to the day of the Knisa for Thursday, perhaps to have Rev Amhadras Melech. But whatever the case is, it's completely different than the general rule because it's already pushed off. But over here, the brisa that we mentioned earlier is Manam Erev Shabbos. There, it's the 14th is Friday, and so therefore there's no need for it to be shifted at all, and therefore there's no comparison. Okay, so we accept that. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so now, Frank the Gemara, Man Oslo. Who does this opinion follow? How the Amar Reb Chelboi Amar Rav Huna. There's a statement that was taught in the name of Rav Huna that says as follows. He says, Purim Shecholius B'Shabbos. If Purim falls out on Shabbos, meaning the 14th of Adar falls out on a Shabbos, Hakol Nidachim Liyem HaKnisa. All, meaning all the different locales are shifted to the day of the assembly, which means on Thursday. So before we're going to start saying that it goes according to Rebbe, before we say that, we come along and we say that what the way the question was phrased is seemingly inaccurate, because can it really be a consideration to say that everybody, including the walled cities, should go back to Thursday? Can't be hakol. Can't be including the walled cities. Why? You have the people who are in the walled cities, the Avdilamacha. They, in a case where Purim falls out on a Shabbos, on the 14th, so the people in the walled cities are going to do their regular day on the 15th, on the Sunday. So obviously, when it says that you're going to go back to Thursday, it can't include the Mukafim, the people who are in the walled cities. Ella, rather, what it means to say is the statement from Reb Huna was Kol Hanidcha, from all those who have to be shifted, meaning anybody who normally would read on the 14th, but since it's on Shabbos, it's going to be pushed off. All of them, both the big towns and the villages, all of them will be Yidach Aliyeh Makrisa, will be shifted to the day of the assembly. So the question is, come on, who does this statement of Reb Huna follow? So he says, Rebbe, it's in accordance with the brisa that we said from above in the name of Rebbe. Okay. After all is said and done, ultimately, we have everybody agreeing that we do not read the Megillah on Shabbos. And yet, we have not yet, in this Gemara, stated why. So says the Gemara, the Kula Alma, everybody holds, the Kula Alma Miha, at any rate, everybody holds the Megillah b'Shabbos Likarina. We do not read the Megillah on Shabbos. And the question is, my timer, why don't we read the Megillah on Shabbos? So Amar Rabbah comes along and says, because this is the concern. Hakol chayavim b'kriyas Megillah. Everybody is obligated to read the Megillah, and for that matter, u'b'tkiyas shofar, and for the blowing of the shofar. But the ein hakol b'kiyid b'mikra Megillah. Not everybody is competent in reading the Megillah, and so therefore we make a rule not to read it on Shabbos. Gezerah, it's a precautionary measure, that you shouldn't take the Megillah in your hand, and go to an expert to teach me how to read the Megillah. And thereby you come to carry 4 Abbas in the Rishus Harabim, which is a biblical violation because you're not allowed to carry. You have the, Hitzah. You have this the biblical violation to carry in the Rishus Harabim, more than Daled Abbas. And so therefore, because we're worried that somebody wants to read the Megillah for somebody at home, for example, or he's going to be reading it in shul, but he's not sure about something. So he takes his Megillah and he runs to the expert, Baal Kaira, to ask him a question to help him read the Megillah. And we're worried that as a result of that, he's going to come to carry on Shabbos. So therefore, because we're worried about this, and the same thing is with regards to Shofar, we make this rule not to do it on Shabbos. Behind the time of the Shofar, this is the same reason why we don't blow Shofar when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos. Behind the time of the Lulav, this is also the same concern for Lulav when Sukkot falls out on Shabbos, even though these are biblical commands to take a Lulav and to blow a Shofar. But nevertheless, because we're worried about Chilul Shabbos, so therefore we make this clear that you don't blow the shofar, you don't shake the lulav, and you don't read the Megillah on Purim that falls out on Shabbos. Now, that's the opinion of Rabbah. Now, Rav Yosef, and according to Tosfos, Rav Yosef is not coming to argue with Rabbah, but to add an extra reason. Rav Yosef says, because the poor people are anxiously awaiting the time for the reading of the Megillah. What does that mean? That means that if I'm going to have the reading of the Megillah on the Shabbos, right, and the poor people know that when we read the Megillah, that's when I come to get gifts of money from the people in the community, and they look forward to this. And then on Shabbos, you're not allowed to give gifts, and you're not allowed to give money on Shabbos. So the poor people are going to come. They're going to hear the Megillah, and then be completely let down when they don't get their gifts. And that's something that the rabbis didn't want. And so that's an additional reason why we don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, Tanya Namahachi, there's actually a brisa that supports Rav Yosef's opinion that the poor people are anxiously waiting for the gifts on Purim, and that's why we postpone it. It's sort of the brisa, even though the rabbi said that the villagers may advance their reading to the day of the assembly. Nevertheless, they must collect the gifts from the poor on that day, meaning the day of the assembly, and they distribute it on that day, which means to say as follows. If I come along and I have a situation where, for example, we'll use one example that we use till now, that Purim fell out on a Friday, and the Purim that falls out on a Friday, we send the people from the villages, they come back and they come earlier to hear it on when? They come to hear the Megillah on Thursday, which is the 13th. So we say that you also make sure to make the collection and to give the money and the gifts to the poor people on the same day that you read the Megillah. Why? Because this is when they're looking forward to get the gifts. But the Gemara asks about the language used over here. Afal Pisha Amru. What does this mean? What's this expression when it says the Brisa, even though the rabbi said? This makes it sound like the villagers read the Megillah on the day of the assembly, and that should be a reason not to give them the gifts. That doesn't make sense. So rather, in other words, our contention is Adrabah. It's only because the rabbi said that the villagers must read the Megillah on the day of the assembly do they come to get the gifts on that day. So Ella. So rather, this is how you should read the Brisa. Hoyel, since va'amru, not afal pisha amru, but hoyel, since va'amru, the rabbis institute that you should bring the reading of the Megillah earlier to the Yom HaKnisa. Therefore, you should collect gifts for the poor of that day, and they distribute the gifts on that day. If they because the people are actually waiting for the Megillah reading in anticipation for receiving all of their money gifts. Okay, so therefore, even though what we're going to see in a moment, that the other mitzvahs of the day, the simcha and other mitzvahs that you have on Purim, are still left for the 14th on the day of Purim. Right? Even though you're reading the Megillah a day early as an accommodation, we made an exception to the mitzvah of Matanas Lev Yedim to also bring that earlier to the day before Purim, right? In order to be able to take into consideration the poor people who are looking forward to this and have this association between reading the Megillah and receiving the Matanas Lev Yedim. Avol, says the Gemara, however, with regards to all the other mitzvahs of Purim, or at least here it says Aval Simcha, with regards to the obligation of rejoicing, which is the Su'udas Purim, right? That is only going to be on the day, which is on the regular time, the 14th of Adar, which would be, in the case that we suggested, it would be on the Friday, right? And perhaps also Mishlach Manos would also be on the 14th. Okay. What's the time now? It's 53. Okay. So says the Gemara is now going to discuss a new thing. We're on Daf Hey or with Aleph, the top of the page. So the Gemara is going to discuss whether you need to have a minyan to read the Megillah or not. Rav said, Megillah Bismana, when the Megillah is read in its proper time, meaning on the 14th of Adar for the unwalled cities, and on the 15th for the walled cities. So then, in that case, then you can even read it privately. You don't need to have a minyan. But in a case where you're relying on a leniency, or there's a situation where, like for example, it falls out on Shabbos, and you're not doing it in its exact time, when you're not reading it in its correct time, meaning it's not the 14th, it's not or the 15th. So, Basara, you need to have at least 10 people in attendance to be able to read it. Rav Asi says, it doesn't matter whether you're reading it on the day of Purim itself or you're reading it a day earlier. Nevertheless, you always need to have a minyan when you're reading the Megillah. Okay. And what's the reason for it? The reason is because there's something called Persumei Nisa. Persumei Nisa means you want to publicize the miracle as much as possible. Okay. Have a uvda. Rav there was an actual case when the Megillah was being read in its proper time, and Rav was concerned to fulfill the ruling of Rav Asi, and he went out and he gathered 10 people together in order to hear the Megillah. Me Amar Rav Hachi, did Rav really say this? Rav Yehuda Breder Rav Shmuel Bar Shelas, Shmei Rav Yehuda son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shelas said in the name of Rav, Purim Shecholi is be'erev b'Shabbos. When Purim falls out on Shabbos, erev Shabbos is Manom. Then Friday is the proper time for reading the Megillah. So 1 second before we go any further, the Gemara wants to understand, what does it mean erev Shabbos Manom? What does it mean? Shabbos Manam. How can you say that reading the Megillah in the Erev Shabbos is Manam? It's in fact not reading it in its proper time, because Shabbos is Manam. Really, the proper time is the 14th, which is Shabbos. So what do you mean? Rather, this is what Rav meant. When you're reading it in another time, which is other than its proper time, it's as if it's being read in its proper time. So we're equating the day before to the actual day of Purim. So, but we say, and either way, we say as follows: just when the Megillah is read in the proper time. It can be read even privately, right? So too, when the Megillah is read in a time other than the proper time, it is read even privately. So this statement of Rav seems to be against the situation that we just mentioned, where Rav was careful with regards to following the ruling of Rav Asi, that even when it's in its time, meaning when Purim falls out on the 14th, and you can read it on that day, and you read it, you should make sure to do it with a minyan because of Persumei Nisa. So, according to this explanation, it seems to contradict what we're saying over here. So, for the Gemara, no, you're not understanding. Your understanding of Rav's second statement is not correct. Why? Because in regards to the Megillah reading on Friday, Rav agrees it has to be done with 10 people. Ella, my Erev Shabbos Manim. So then what did Rav mean when he says that Shabbos Eve is, meaning on Friday, is the proper time? Afuki de Rebbe. He's coming to say, is to reject the opinion of Rebbe. The Omar, that he said, since they've already been pushed off, so then they can be shifted to Thursday. So this comes then in order to teach us the Erev Shabbos Manamu, that Erev Shabbos is really the proper time and not Thursday, as Rebbe said. In other words, we had initially thought that what Rebbe was coming to tell, what Rav was coming to teach us with regards to saying that that Erev Shabbos Zmanom is to teach me that just like when Purim falls out on a regular day, you'd be able to read it b'yichidus and not read it and not have to have a minyan. So too, when it's not on its appropriate day, which means to say when it falls out on Shabbos and you bring it in a day earlier, so too then you don't need to have it with 10. We're coming along now and we're saying that's the incorrect understanding of the statement of Rav. Really, what Rav is coming to teach us is the following: that there's an opinion of Rebbe. The opinion of Rebbe is that since you've already postponed and pushed off the day of the reading of Purim from Shabbos to Friday, once you pushed it off, you might as well push it off to the Yom Knisa to do it with the people of the villages. Says Rav, no, because when I say Zmanom is Erev Shabbos, it means that we are equating the day before to the actual day. That just like the 14th is the appropriate time to read it, so too when it falls out on Shabbos, the 13th is made like the 14th. It's made to be like the 14th, and therefore we don't come along and make the people from the unwalled cities to bring it earlier to the day of the Yom HaKnesset of Thursday, like Rabbi says. So Rav is of a different opinion. However, this that we stated before, that he agreed with Rav Asi to try and gather a minyan before reading the Megillah, that stays in its place, that he is of the opinion that you should try, where possible, to be concerned about the ruling of Rav Asi, that you read it with a minyan. And we'll stop here. And I wish you all a Lag Sameach, and you should have a wonderful day. B'schus Hatana, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai should be a good advocate for all of us, and we should be zeicha to go back to Yerushalayim and to have the minyan Beis Hamikdash, b'karav mamash.
Amen.
Amen. Bye-bye,
And
Rabbi.
we already did Chagiga. Look at that.
Zayin gesund, everybody.
Okay.